researcher, you may have to get your paper edited. You may have to get your paper checked by a native speaker before submission to a journal to make sure that the English does not become an issue in the peer review process. But don't forget, you can suggest in your cover letter when you write it to a journal, when you make your submission to a journal, you can make some suggestions in that cover letter as to who you think would be good reviewers for the paper. Also, keep in mind that editors at journals manage the process. They talk directly to reviewers about your paper, and there's going to be lots of information that comes back to the journal, to the editor, that you may never get to see. Reviewers very often make comments to the editor that you will never know about, direct comments to the editor about your work. So these comments also inform decisions in the process. You, the author, get to see just a small number of comments about your paper that are made by the reviewers back to the journal. So keep that in mind as well. Very important thing to think about. You may not see all of the information that the journal has in regards to the comments about your paper. So peer reviewers can be acting single blind, double blind, or the process could be completely open. And we think, as authors, what's the best for us? What journal would be best for my next paper as an author? And also, please always keep in mind that peer reviewers tend to come into the process with a negative mindset. They tend to think, where are the issues with this paper? And very often, the issues with academic papers are going to be in the method section. So have a think about your next method section, surviving the process as an early career researcher. How are you going to write your method section, your materials and methods, your data and methods, your experimental methods in such a way so that the reviewers won't have issues with that part of the paper? Because this is the number one place where comments come for reviewers, and comments come and there are problems in these particular areas. So keep that in mind as well as we talk about what reviewers are going to do and how you can select efficiently reviewers for your papers. People always ask us, how can I select peer reviewers for my next paper? How can I do this? How can I get some colleagues that are going to be appropriate for my paper to put into that cover letter? How can I select peer reviewers? You do this via your networks. And even if you don't realize that you have an academic network, you do a mentorship network. You know international colleagues, you know people around the world working in your subject area. Reach out to them with your papers. Communicate with them when you finish a piece of work. Why not send your next title, your next abstract out to those international colleagues and ask them for feedback on your work? I used to do this when I was working on my PhD as an early career researcher. I'd finish some work, I'd send it to international colleagues. I'd say, can I get some feedback on this work? I'm thinking of writing it up as a paper. And the colleagues would come back, they would give me feedback. Often, sometimes they'd ignore me, but sometimes I'd get good, bad feedback. In cases where I got good feedback, positive comments about the work, I would then follow up and say, could I suggest you as a peer reviewer on this paper? And often those colleagues would agree to that. We would get a suggestion for a peer reviewer who might give a favorable response to the paper in review. So why not reach out to people? Why not send an abstract, a summary of your work, initiate those discussions and build a network? This is why it's important to be engaged with international channels, with the kinds of international social networking sites that people use around the world. ResearchGate, academia.edu, LinkedIn, Google Scholar, ORCID. Get onto these platforms, because then people around the world will be able to find you. They will be able to network with you. You will be able to network with them. You will be able to reach out to them and share your work, build that network. So being social, staying connected as a young researcher is an important part of managing the peer review process as we build our networks, as we collaborate and manage peer review. How are you going to get people who you can put onto your cover letter, who would end up being suitable as reviewers that you could suggest for your next paper? By knowing people, by reaching out to people, by talking about your work, by asking international colleagues for comments on your work, and then asking them, can I suggest you as a reviewer? So that's a good way to answer that question. How can I select reviewers for a paper? It's a way in which you can survive the process. If you already know that this international colleague or that international colleague has talked to you about the project, has maybe seen the abstract or seen the title or been on an email exchange with you about the project, let's say potentially, they may very well be a colleague who would be somebody who would give a favorable review at the end of the day when you put them into the system. And this is important in the cover letter in particular, because often journals do not give you, the author, the opportunity to make suggestions inside their submission systems anymore. Here's the submission system for our journal. All you get to do is oppose reviewers. Put in the names and addresses, the email addresses of people that you think would not be suitable to review your paper. Lots of journals had people abusing these systems, putting in their grandmother's email, putting in their friend's email, making up reviewer emails so they could get the paper back to look at themselves. So lots of journals, lots of publishers these days are not allowing authors in the online system to make suggestions for preferred reviewers anymore, but you can still do it in the cover letter. You can still make those suggestions in the cover letter, and that's your opportunity. That's your opportunity as an author to make those suggestions. So don't waste that opportunity. This is the academic cycle, and we provide training at all stages of the academic cycle. Stage 1, you come up with an idea. Stage 2, you look for funding. Stage 3, you search for data. Stage 4, it's that journal selection stage. Notice that that comes before the paper writing stage. Remember, there are 3 things that you should know about before you start to write: message, audience, that's your target journal, and structure before you begin the paper writing process. Stage 5 is paper writing. Stage 6 is submission. Stage 7 is peer review and publication. And the cycle continues, the endless academic cycle, the endless hamster wheel of academic life. And as I mentioned already, we provide training at all stages of this academic cycle. So we've sent a paper to a journal. We've selected the journal before we started to write. We've written the paper. We've submitted the paper to that journal. It's gone out for peer review. So international colleagues working in the same area, experts in the subject, have assessed the paper and they've sent back their comments to the editor. The editor has passed those comments back to us, the author. Another big question that we often get asked is, how long should I wait before communicating with the journal? If I've waited for review comments, how long should I wait before getting in touch with the journal? Don't wait, communicate. If you wait longer than 8 to 10 weeks, that's too long. You should write to the journal if you've had to wait that long and say, can I give you some suggestions for additional peer reviewers? I realize there may be a delay with my paper. Here's the manuscript number. Here's the title. Here's the date on which it was initially submitted. Can I please provide some additional suggestions for peer reviewers? That's a good tip, a good way to speed up the process. What do the different decisions that come back from journals mean? We get back one of 4 possible decisions usually made by peer reviewers: reject, accept, minor revisions, and major revisions. And the bottom 2, of course, are most common after the peer review process. Reject It's rare because often the editors make these decisions pre-peer review. They assess papers before they send them out for peer review. Acceptance after first round of review is also rare. It can happen, but often editors get a bit suspicious if both the reviewers say accept the paper immediately with no changes. The most common kinds of comments then that come back are minor or major